All right, we're live again for another episode of Whiskey Wednesday here at Buffalo Trace Distillery, and we have Master Distiller Harlen Wheatley with us again today. How you doing, Harlen?
I'm doing good. We came today to talk a little bit about some of the fun things we do here at Buffalo Trace. We spend a lot of time on everyday production and legacy brands and things that we're known for as, variety and whiskeys and older whiskeys and, being on the cutting edge of certain things. And so one of the big programs for us is the experimental program. And in the experimental program for us, it encompasses a lot of different things. It's barrel production, it's recipes and cooking techniques, it's distillation, and all these different things that we look at. But one of the things we focused on over the years is the environment and the way that environment changes the whiskey as it ages. So in 2013, we decided to put our money where our mouth is and spend over $1 million to produce Warehouse X, which is our experimental warehouse where we can look at the environment and how that changes the whiskey. So we'll check that out.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I was really checking out from back there how it fits into the architecture of the rest of the distillery. It's brick, got some stone, so it's not like it doesn't look like a brand new build.
Right.
It has a little character to it.
And one of the things we did for the construction is we looked at where do we sit the warehouse as it relates to the sun, the morning sun, the evening sun, and we chose this flat roof on purpose because we wanted that sun to get the full roof as it crosses the warehouse, because we put skylights in this warehouse to create light inside the warehouse. So the design of the warehouse was also part of the experiment.
And where's this located? Where are we exactly at the distillery? We're up on the hill
next
to...
We call it Stony Point, and it's a pretty well-known site here at the distillery where we had Colonel Blanton's dwelling up at the top, and we use it for offices now, but it's part of the gardens, botanical gardens that we have on site, and then it's basically overlooks the distillery. The distillery is down in a valley. You might get some shots of that later, but we're down in a valley, and over on the other side is all of our warehousing, and behind us is the farm where we have a lot of our warehousing. So we're kind of overlooking the whole distillery. Mm-hmm. So in 2013 is when we, broke the bottle on the side and made all of our plans, and we developed a 20-year program where we laid out experiments over the next 20 years that will allow us to kind of determine the future of aging, at least for our recipes. And we did that, and we looked at basically 4 variables, where it was airflow, temperature, humidity, and surface temperature or light inside the chambers. And so we did that. Each chamber holds 30 barrels in ricks, so they're similar to what we experience in the warehouse. And the important thing is we've also got a control. So in the middle is a breezeway where we monitor the airflow, we monitor temperature and humidity, but we don't control it. So we're checking each chamber as basically like a wind tunnel, where we can put these barrels in there and expose them to different environments, and then see how those whiskeys react as compared to doing nothing in the breezeway. And we've learned, we started it in 2013, and we've gathered over 15 million data points. We gather about a couple million data points every 6 months, and we're just learning a whole lot about, so far we've learned about temperature differences and sunlight and surface temperature on the barrels, pressure inside those barrels, and then how that reacts to the environment. So we're learning, as we go, and like I said, it's a 20-year program, so we'll finish up in, 2033, and we'll say, okay, this is the very best all-around way to age a barrel of whiskey at Buffalo Trace. So what we did is we have the 4 chambers. So this chamber is meant to mimic the breezeway, but in this experiment we're adding some temperature to it. So if the temperature in a breezeway is 85 degrees, the temperature in this breezeway might be 90 degrees. And then as it swings during the night and the day, we'll swing this one also. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but we have an HVAC system that will allow us to do that. And then we're monitoring surface temperature, pressure inside the barrels, and also taste and color and all the things that you do with the whiskeys. So this is one of the chambers. The next one is a little bit different because one of the things we wanted to check is how does swinging temperatures vary from steady temperatures. There's at degree days, and one of the things in here is we don't have the skylight, so it's also dark. We're not seeing those surface temperature differences that we see on the hotter days. So, as compared to a normal warehouse, they may be sitting in front of a window and you see a total different surface temperature compared to the rest of the warehouse. So we're monitoring those. And of course the breezeway, we'll go in there in a second, but in the breezeway we're not doing anything. So it's sitting there, full humidity, rainstorms, the whole deal. It sees a whole different environment, and we want to see how those react. Third chamber is similar to the second, however, just different temperatures. We wanted to hold this at a nice steady temperature and compare those surface temperatures and pressures and colors and see how those barrels act. But these barrels have been in now for 6 months and they look like brand new barrels. So we'll see how those are compared. This particular experiment is a 2-year experiment. It'll take us 2 years to complete and get all the data and be able to tell, kind of what we get.
So one thing I've noticed is it's not like you're setting this and forgetting it. You've got different experiments coming in and out, learning things 6 months, a year, 2 years, 6 years.
Right. Yeah, this is a 20-year experiment. So we have several of those types of experiments. We have a 20-year experiment with the Single Oak project, and it took us that long to get the results and get that whiskey out there and accumulate the data. And then we're also making another whiskey. So that's a 20-year experiment. This is the same way. At the end of it, we're going to learn a lot about, why a barrel tastes the way it does at Buffalo Trace. This one is a little bit cooler temperatures, so we're dropping that temperature down, and then we're in the back we've got airflow, and we can show you how we're monitoring surface temperatures on the sides.
Yeah, and just like some of the rick houses, if we get a little bit of technology issues with our signal, we'll be out of here in a second, so just hang with us.
We're checking pressures inside. We want to see, and we're doing that in all the chambers. We're just seeing how that whiskey's acting inside the barrel. We're also checking temperatures, and then we sample, of course, and get tasting notes, and we also analyze the whiskey and see how these are changing as compared to our normal warehouses. So we're just learning a whole lot about the way Buffalo Trace recipe. This is one recipe. Every chamber has the same recipe made on the same day. So we're learning a lot about how these particular recipes, act in different environments. And again, so far we've been doing it for almost 7 years.
So different temperatures, different lighting, humidities, cold, warm, all the above.
That's right.
And again, with the probe back there, that was, what did you say that was? That was pressure inside the barrel?
We're doing pressure and temperature inside that barrel. And we also look at surface temperatures on the wood itself, based on, most of that's due to sunlight and the exposure to sunlight. And on the inside, in the breezeway, you notice the rust on the hoops because, again, exposed to the environment, basically. And you're going to get a little bit more rust on the hoops. And the whiskey, this particular experiment, the whiskey has been exposed to 95 degrees as a high, and as a low, it's only been down to 28 degrees since we put these in February, late February. So you don't see the extremes, but the experiment before that, it got up to 105 and got all the way down to -5. So the whiskey inside these barrels really saw the big swings on the temperatures.
And what's different, here in the breezeway than, say, a typical warehouse here at Buffalo Trace Distillery?
Yeah, the biggest difference for us is one of the things that kind of sets us apart is the fact that our warehouses are tight and they're all heated in the wintertime. So we're driving out some of that humidity and we're driving out some of that moisture. And then we feel like we gain a little bit of aging time over our competitors because we heat them all. And that really helps with the aging of the whiskey.
So the rust that we're seeing in the breezeway, that's really due to, it's just out here in the elements.
It's just out in the elements because the rain and the high humidity in here inside, and it gets a lot of differences.
Sure. And then this one has a big skylight too, like a very clear skylight. Yeah, I didn't notice as much rust on the hoops on some of the other chambers.
And with the HVAC, we tried to, make sure that we had a robust enough system to be able to handle the giant swings. So, if we want to heat a room up to 95 degrees pretty quickly, we have dual systems in place in order to be able to get that done. It's about a $600,000 HVAC system to be able to do that. And then on top of that, we wanted to monitor, what each thing is doing. We had to have a system in place to do that. And if you've got 15 million data points, you can't do that by hand. So we rely pretty heavily on the computer data, and we're monitoring every aspect inside these chambers. And so in this breezeway, we've got an 87 degree space in here. And so chamber 4, one of the things we wanted to do was we wanted to add temperature to that space compared to the breezeway. So it's 90 degrees in chamber 4, and then we're monitoring what these barrel pressures and the liquid temperatures and the pressure inside these barrels, are seeing during that changes. And we monitor all 4 of those chambers the same way. And we're just trying to, gather as much data as we can. And again, it's all about the future of aging, for us.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, it's just really trying to understand the science of what the environment does so you can make decisions based on all this research.
Right, and it's just like with any research, we want to be more consistent with our legacy brands. We want to learn, it's like NASCAR. We want to learn how to make the tires better. You got to do a lot of experimenting. We got to learn a lot about, why, if we see a really hot year, how that's going to affect the whiskey, what the humidity levels were. And at the end of the day, if you've got a barrel that's been sitting there for 8 years and you can map out everything it's been exposed to, then you should be able to predict a little bit closer how that whiskey's going to taste.
Consistency.
It's pretty important for our business.
Yeah. We were at a different warehouse last week with Freddie, and we talked about last drop and the cooling system in that warehouse. So that seemed like a little bit different of an experiment compared to Warehouse X.
Yeah, that experiment is also a long-term experiment, but for that one, we want to look at how low temperatures, fixed humidity levels, airflow's fixed. We want to know how that affects whiskey as it ages in the long term. So we might stick a barrel in there for 25 years and see how that barrel reacts, to being in there as an older product. So that's a different style. It's still environmental. It's an environmental project, for the whiskey, but it's just different. With a Warehouse X, we're able to control a lot of different variables, at one time.
So some of the questions we are getting is basically, is there anything that you have learned from Warehouse X in this warehouse that has been applied to, a product that we've tasted or seen in the market today?
Well, the answer is yes. We've learned a whole lot about how the temperature affects the barrels and how the humidity levels and then those airflows, and we understand when we go to the second floor of a warehouse why these whiskeys are tasting the way they are, and so it allows us to be more consistent with our everyday products. But really the main summary to this point, after 15 million data points, is you can take same day's production, same barrels, and produce different whiskeys by changing that environment. And we've proven it, and through these 6 years of experiments. And it's really important for us to understand that and preserve, especially our legacy brands. We want to preserve that flavor, moving forward.
For sure. Well, we usually try to keep it around 15 minutes. We know you're busy. We do have a few questions that's come in on Facebook, and sorry I won't get to them all. There's a lot of great ones.
Yeah.
Ronald asks, will some of those experiments in Warehouse X become annual or limited releases?
Well, that remains to be seen. The marketing guys are, licking their chops as far as, being able to taste this whiskey and see what they can come up with. So it just remains to be seen. I think if you look at our history, we love to have people taste our whiskeys and give us feedback and let us know what they taste like, and so we'll just see how it turns out on that.
So mainly, this is a research facility with not like this is going to be a brand one day. This is more about learning and experimenting and applying that to other brands and other future brands.
Yeah, it is. We call it, the future of aging. And so we're just learning all there is to know, or at least a lot we can learn from the aging test that we're doing,
Matt Henderson asks, how often, if ever, do you take the barrels out and roll them around to keep all the wood wet?
Well, we do take them out between experiments. So of the 20 years that we have laid out on experiments, several of them are 2-year experiments. So after 2 years, we'll roll all these barrels out, put them in a designated place in the warehouse, and we'll roll, fresh barrels in because we're starting a new experiment. So these barrels are not sitting in any one place for very long. However, in our normal warehouses, we let them sit and we don't rotate those barrels because we want those flavor differences between the floors. And the one thing, the humidity levels inside that barrel, you don't really find dried out barrels on top because you're still, evaporating through that wood.
So that wood's always wet from evaporation, different things.
That wood is always experiencing, on the inside of that barrel, you've got whiskey, you've got water from the whiskey, you've got all this humidity inside that barrel that's evaporating through the wood pores, and it just stays, moist the whole time.
Yeah, another question from Dave on Facebook says, it looks like we've done 2 weeks of experiments, right? How many barrels or experiments are going on here at the distillery?
Well, we literally have hundreds and thousands. We have hundreds of experiments and thousands of barrels, and it ranges. Like I said, we look at all techniques. We look at recipes. We've got hundreds of ideas in order to keep something in the hopper all the time, and more experiments coming. We've got experiments that come online every year, and we have to release them through the experimental releases in our labels, or through the Taylor label, or through the Weller label, like with Craft Your Perfect Bourbon. So we've got a lot of different avenues to release these experiments to let the public taste and let us know, give us the feedback.
That's great. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Harlen. One more thing, I'm interested in is the expansion here at the distillery. We always like to talk about it. Is there any updates there about where we are on certain things?
Yeah, the fun thing about the expansion is, everything we're doing now, we're just basically going to duplicate that. And we're in the middle of all the planning stages to add on a new distillation system, add on more dry house capabilities. We just finished our cooking operation. We're almost complete with our fermentation expansion. So all these things are designed to make more whiskey and get more whiskey on the market.
That's great. That's great news for all of us.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Harlen.
All right.